My name is Clara Jennings, and I am 66 years old. I never imagined that I would walk into my son's wedding only to be treated as an intruder. Yet that is exactly where I found myself, standing in the grand ballroom of the Ashton Estate in Savannah, Georgia, dressed in a simple black dress while everyone else shimmered in satin and sequins. My son Michael, the pride of my life, stood at the altar waiting for his bride, his face glowing with anticipation. He had no idea what was about to happen. The words I spoke cut through the laughter and chatter of 300 wedding guests. They turned in unison, eyes wide, forks clinking against fine china as silence swallowed the room. I could feel the tension rising, like a storm pressing against the windows. For many of those people, I was the villain, the uninvited mother come to spoil her son's happiest day. But I knew the truth. I knew this day would be remembered not for love and vows, but for the unmasking of a dangerous deception. Standing there, I forced myself to breathe slowly, to hold my chin high even as my heart pounded so hard I thought the pearls around my neck would rattle. I remembered every sacrifice, every long night working 2 jobs to raise Michael after his father passed away, every dream I had of watching him build a life of honesty and happiness. And I knew, in that moment, that if I had to bear the shame of disrupting this grand celebration to save my son from ruin, then so be it. As the bride turned her head, her face painted in perfect makeup, and a veil flowing like ivory smoke, I watched the color drain from her cheeks. She recognized the man who had just stepped forward behind me, and in that instant, her perfect world began to crumble. Long before that shocking day at the Ashton Estate, my story had been one of endurance. I became a widow at the age of 32 when my husband, Daniel, was taken from us in a tragic car accident. At the time, Michael was only 8 years old, full of questions about why his father would never walk through the door again. I had no answers, only the ache of grief and the fierce determination to carry on. Those early years were a blur of long shifts and empty nights. I worked at the local library during the day and cleaned offices in the evening, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. I remember coming home past midnight, my hands raw from scrubbing, only to find Michael asleep at the kitchen table with his homework spread out around him. He would always wait for me, even if he had to fight off sleep. In those quiet moments, I promised myself that all the sacrifices would be worth it if they meant he could live a life of opportunity. Michael grew into a young man I was deeply proud of. He excelled in school, went on to study engineering, and built a career that carried him far beyond the small town where he was born. Yet no matter how far he traveled, he never stopped calling me every Sunday, asking about my week and making sure I was okay. He was my anchor, and I was his. We had survived so much together that I believed nothing could ever come between us. That belief was what made the events leading up to his wedding so unbearable. When he introduced me to Olivia Bennett, I wanted so badly to trust his judgment, to welcome her into our family as the daughter I never had. Olivia seemed like the perfect partner, gentle voice, kind smile, the sort of woman who looked like she belonged in glossy bridal magazines. I convinced myself she was exactly what Michael deserved after all his hard work and kindness. For a while, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps my years of sacrifice were finally being rewarded, but deep down, there were cracks in the story I couldn't quite ignore. When Michael first brought Olivia Bennett home, I remember the way he looked at her. His eyes sparkled with the kind of hope I had not seen since he was a boy opening gifts on Christmas morning. Olivia carried herself with an elegance that drew everyone in. She was 29 with golden hair that framed her face in soft waves, and a gentle laugh that made strangers lean closer just to hear it again. She said she worked as a pediatric nurse and spent her weekends volunteering at an animal shelter. It sounded like the resume of an angel, and I wanted to believe every word. At dinner that evening, she leaned across the table, her voice trembling just slightly, and confided that her own parents disapproved of her relationship with Michael. They thought he was beneath their family's standards, that she was giving up her future by choosing love over money. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Mrs. Jennings, you're the mother I never had." My heart softened instantly. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, promising that she would always have a place in my family. From that night on, I poured myself into helping plan their wedding. Olivia claimed she had dreamed of a grand ceremony since childhood, so I made it my mission to give her exactly that. I emptied the savings Daniel had left us, cashed out old bonds, and even borrowed against my house to cover the costs. $45,000 disappeared in the blink of an eye. I told myself it was worth it. After all, isn't that what mothers do? We sacrifice so our children can have happiness. The Ashton estate was booked for the big day, a sprawling mansion with gardens that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Olivia had chosen a gown worth $12,000, a Vera Wang creation that shimmered in candlelight, while florists prepared to deliver 2,000 roses flown in from Ecuador. Every detail sparkled with extravagance, and I convinced myself it was all justified because my son deserved the wedding of his dreams. Yet even in the middle of all the excitement, small things bothered me. Olivia always paid with cash, brushing away questions with a laugh about being old-fashioned. Her childhood stories shifted each time she told them, as if she could not remember the details of her own past. I brushed it aside, reassuring myself that love sometimes makes people mysterious. But in the quiet hours of night, doubt sat heavy on my chest, whispering that something about Olivia Bennet was not what it seemed. The truth revealed itself on an ordinary evening, a night when I was supposed to be nothing more than a helpful mother of the groom. I had stopped by Michael's apartment to drop off boxes of wedding favors, small silver frames Olivia had chosen, embossed with the initials M and O. The apartment was quiet, the lights dim, and I assumed they were both out running errands. I let myself in with the spare key Michael had given me, humming softly as I set the boxes down in the living room. That was when I heard Olivia's voice, low and sharp, drifting from the bedroom. I froze. Something in her tone was not the gentle sweetness she usually displayed. It was colder, calculated, a voice that did not belong to the woman who had called me the mother she never had. My heart quickened as I leaned against the hallway wall, straining to hear every word. "Victor, I told you not to call me on this number," she hissed. "Yes, the wedding is still on." "No, Michael doesn't suspect a thing. Once we're married, I'll have access to his accounts. We agreed on 30%. Don't try to change the deal now." The blood drained from my face. My hands trembled as I covered my mouth, desperate to stop the gasp rising in my throat. She was talking about my son, my Michael, as though he were nothing more than a mark in one of her schemes. And worse, she spoke of me. "The old woman has already given us more than 40 grand, she whispered, her words slicing through the air. "She'll probably hand over more for a down payment on the house after the wedding. This one could be worth 200,000, maybe more." I pressed myself tighter against the wall, my palms slick with sweat. The world tilted, the hallway swaying around me. My own generosity, the sacrifices I had made, were now weapons in her hands. My son, the boy I had raised with love and hope, was prey in her cruel game. I crept backward, every step careful, until I reached the front door. I managed to leave without making a sound, but by the time I reached my car, the weight of what I had heard crushed me. I pulled over just 3 blocks away, clutching the steering wheel, gasping for air as tears blurred my vision. For nearly an hour I sat there, trembling and broken. Yet somewhere in the storm of fear and heartbreak, a new feeling began to rise: resolve. If Olivia Bennet thought she could destroy my son and strip us of everything, she had chosen the wrong family. I would not be silent. I would not be powerless. I would fight. The next morning, after a sleepless night filled with restless pacing, I made a decision that would change everything. I knew my suspicions were not enough. Michael was blinded by love, and my word alone would never be enough to convince him. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that Olivia Bennet was not who she claimed to be. With shaking hands, I sat down at my kitchen table and typed words I never imagined myself searching: Private Investigator Savannah Giorgio. That is how I found Patricia Moore. She was a retired police detective who specialized in fraud and financial crimes. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where regulars ordered without looking at menace. Patricia was sharp, no nonsense, with eyes that studied me carefully as I explained everything I had overheard. When I finished, she folded her hands and leaned forward. "Mrs. Jennings, what you've described is a textbook romance scam. These people are professionals. They learn their targets inside and out, figure out what they want most, and then become exactly that person." Her words confirmed what my gut already knew. Without hesitation, I slid a check across the table, my savings nearly drained but my resolve unshaken. "How long will it take?" I asked. Patricia gave a thin smile. For someone careless enough to use her real voice on the phone, "Not long at all." 2 weeks later, Patricia called me with the results. "Clara, are you sitting down?" she asked. My knees weakened as I gripped the edge of the counter. "Your son's fiancée does not exist. Olivia Bennet is an alias. Her real name is Samantha Reed. She's 29, originally from Tampa, and she has been arrested 3 times for fraud." She has a long history of working with partners, usually men, and one name keeps coming up: Victor Cruz. The name jolted me. This was the man she had been speaking to on the phone. Patricia went on to explain that Samantha and Victor had once been romantically involved until she scammed him out of $15,000 and disappeared. He had been searching for her ever since. A strange calm settled over me as Patricia's words sank in. For weeks I had been paralyzed by fear and grief, but now I had a weapon: truth. "Can you find him?" I asked. Patricia hesitated. "You mean Victor Cruz?" "Yes, but Clara, what are you planning?" My voice was steady when I replied. "If he has been chasing her for years, I imagine he'd be very interested in attending her wedding." That night, I dialed the number Patricia provided. My heart pounded as a man's voice answered. "This is Victor." I drew in a deep breath. "Mr. Cruz, my name is Clara Jennings. You once knew her as Samantha Reed. She's about to marry my son in 9 days. Silence followed, heavy and dangerous, before he finally spoke. "Tell me everything." The morning of the wedding arrived gray and heavy, clouds pressing low over Savannah as if the heavens themselves knew the storm that was about to break. I had not slept more than a few hours in the past week. Every moment had been spent preparing, rehearsing what I would say, and coordinating with Victor Cruz. He had agreed, almost eagerly, to confront Samantha Reed Olivia Bennett in the most public way possible. He wanted closure. I wanted justice. Together we were about to deliver both. The Ashton estate looked like something out of a magazine spread. 2,000 white roses lined the grand entryway. Strings of violins floated through the air. Guests in glittering gowns and crisp tuxedos filled the chapel, murmuring with excitement about the society wedding of the season. Michael stood at the altar, his face glowing with love and pride. He had no idea he was seconds away from heartbreak. I slipped in quietly through the garden entrance, a route I knew well from earlier planning sessions. No one noticed the older woman in a modest black dress making her way to the back of the chapel. From my hidden position behind a marble column, I could see everything: the minister shuffling notes, the photographer adjusting lenses, and most of all my son, smiling as though the world finally made sense. My heart ached. In just moments I would break that smile, but I reminded myself that sometimes love means being willing to wound in order to protect. The organ swelled, and every guest rose to their feet. Olivia, no, Samantha appeared at the doorway, framed by candlelight. She was radiant in her $12,000 gown, the pearl necklace around her throat gleaming with cruel irony. She carried herself like a queen, floating down the aisle toward her unsuspecting groom. Michael's eyes shone with tears, mine filled with something else entirely: rage. As she reached the midpoint of the aisle, I slipped my phone from my purse and sent a single text: "Now." The heavy wooden doors swung open again, and Victor Cruz stepped inside. He was no polished guest in designer clothes, but a man hardened by betrayal. His suit was wrinkled, his stride steady, his face carved with determination. Conversation stilled. All eyes followed him as he marched down the aisle. "Sarah Collins," his voice boomed, using yet another alias from her past. "Or should I call you by your favorite, Samantha Reed? Did you really think you could hide from me forever?" The chapel erupted in gasps. Olivia Samantha froze, her bouquet slipping from her trembling hands. The roses scattered across the marble floor like shards of broken promises. Michael stepped forward, confusion and alarm clouding his features. "Sir, you must be mistaken. This is Olivia Bennett, my fiancée." Victor barked a bitter laugh. "Is that what she told you?" "I know her better than anyone. I was her partner until she stole $15,000 and left me for dead. She's a con artist and she's about to ruin you." Samantha's mask cracked, her perfect smile faltered, and her eyes darted wildly. "Michael, don't listen to him. He's delusional. He's obsessed with me. Please believe me." Her voice wavered, no longer the flawless performance she had perfected. Murmurs spread through the crowd, phones lifted discreetly as guests began recording. Victor pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Here are the photos, the police records, the arrest warrants. She has been arrested 3 times for fraud. She is not a nurse. She is not who she says she is. And if you need more proof, I have recordings." He held up his phone. Samantha's own voice filled the chapel, sneering, "Cold, the old woman has already given us more than 40 grand. The son is just a mama's boy. Once I marry him, the accounts are mine." Michael's face crumbled. His gaze flickered from the phone to the woman he thought he loved. Color drained from his cheeks as realization set in. Samantha dropped her veil, desperation clawing at her voice. It's not true. He's twisting my words. Michael, you know me. You know I love you. But her pleas fell flat against the tidal wave of truth crashing through the room. The final blow came as the chapel doors opened once more. 2 men in dark suits strode in, badges raised. Samantha Reed, one announced, "You are under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and federal banking violations." Gasps turned into a frenzy as the bride was handcuffed in her $12,000 gown, led down the aisle not as a wife but as a criminal. Guests whispered furiously, their cameras flashing, capturing history being rewritten before their very eyes. My son's wedding had become her downfall, and the entire world was there to see it. The chapel was silent after the doors closed behind the federal agents. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. 300 guests sat frozen in their seats, unsure whether to stand, leave, or speak. The minister remained at the altar, clutching his notes with a pale face, clearly unprepared for such a turn of events. The wedding that had been promised as a fairy tale had dissolved into something unthinkable. Michael still stood at the front, his tuxedo immaculate but his world shattered. He stared at the doors where Samantha, where Olivia had been dragged away, the confusion and betrayal plain on his face. My heart ached to go to him, to wrap my arms around him as I had when he was a boy and comfort him. But I knew this was a pain he had to face himself. Some lessons, even the most painful ones, must be learned in silence. Around us, guests began to murmur again. Whispers filled the air, words like fraud, scam, unbelievable circling through the pews. Some shook their heads in sympathy for Michael, others exchanged knowing glances, as if relieved that they had trusted their own suspicions about the too-perfect bride. A few had already pulled out their phones, broadcasting the disaster to friends and family outside the estate. By evening I knew the story would be everywhere. And yet, in the midst of the humiliation and the heartbreak, I felt something else, a sense of relief. The truth was out. My son was safe. He might hate me for the way I had revealed it, for the public spectacle of it all, but at least he had been spared a life built on lies. When Michael finally turned, his eyes found mine. There was no anger there, only raw devastation, as if he were a man who had been both broken and freed in the same breath. I straightened my shoulders, ready for the confrontation I knew was coming. I had saved him from a predator, but now I had to face the harder task, helping him piece together what remained of his heart. After the chaos slowly ebbed and the guests drifted toward the reception hall in uneasy clusters, Michael finally approached me. The weight of the moment pressed down on his shoulders, his steps heavy, his eyes red but resolute. He stopped just a few feet away, searching my face as if looking for something solid to hold on to. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice hoarse, "I don't even know what to say." I took a careful breath. "Then don't. You don't owe me words right now." But he shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "I do, because I didn't believe you. I thought you were jealous or controlling or afraid of losing me, and all this time you were protecting me." I reached out, brushing invisible lint from his lapel the way I had done since he was a boy, and said softly, "You weren't wrong to trust, Michael. Wanting to believe in someone isn't weakness, it's human. Love makes us hope, even when the truth is painful." His eyes filled with tears. She called you a lonely old woman. She mocked everything you've done for me, and I let her come between us." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. She didn't come between us. Lies did. And lies always fall apart in the end. I unclasped the pearl necklace from around his fiancée's throat, the one that had been in our family for 4 generations. Pressing it into his palm, I whispered, "These belong to the woman you'll marry one day, the one worthy of you, the one who loves you without schemes or conditions." He closed his hand around the pearls as if they were the last piece of faith he had left. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for doubting you, for almost choosing her over you." I pulled him into my arms, holding him tightly. "You don't need to apologize, you only need to heal. And when the time is right, you'll love again, this time with clear eyes." For the first time that day, his shoulders relaxed and I felt him breathe against me. In that embrace, surrounded by the echoes of a wedding that never was, I knew we would both find a way forward. That evening, as the reception that was no longer a reception carried on, I watched friends and neighbors gather around Michael. They offered him words of comfort, glasses of champagne, and promises that he was not alone. The music played softly, couples swayed on the dance floor, and for a moment it felt less like a ruined wedding and more like a community wrapping its arms around a wounded son. It reminded me that life has a way of stitching light into even the darkest seams. I stood by the edge of the room, letting the relief wash over me. My son had been spared a lifetime of lies, even if it came at the cost of a broken heart. The lesson was painful but necessary. Love without honesty is not love at all. Trust is not blind, it must be tested, and sometimes it must be protected by those who love us most. As Michael joined me, pearls still in his pocket, he whispered, "You saved me, Mom." I squeezed his hand and answered simply, "I only gave you the truth. What you do with it is yours to decide." His nod was small but sure, and I knew he would carry that truth with him long after the music faded. So if there is one thing I have learned, it is this: sometimes the most beautiful weddings are the ones that never happen, because they save us from lives we were never meant to live. If this story has touched you, I invite you to share it. Leave a comment, tell us where you are listening from, and let others know that truth, though painful, is always worth revealing. And if you believe, as I do, that love and family are worth fighting for, please subscribe and join us here, where stories of resilience and courage are never forgotten.